my friends. It's an interesting time, to say the least. It's kind of the understatement of my lifetime, I guess, because everything increasingly goes sideways or inward or outward or some other kind of thing, and very few things are going forward or straight. And so it is fascinating for somebody in my business because I'm sitting around all the time trying to figure out where in the world is this going, what is it about, how does it work, and those kinds of things. It's kind of interesting to me because as I look around, I don't think anybody else is thinking about all that, and I just think about it all the time. And one of the things that I've talked about a great deal in this forum and others is the kind of the level of complexity associated with the shift that we're going through. I generally characterize it as this is a big deal. This is a really big deal. The thing that I've been responding to or relating to is generally pretty conventional, but it is related to the extraordinary complexity of the system in which we live. And the fact that when you go through a complete reconfiguration of the whole thing, it has implications and that you just cannot begin to anticipate. Unanticipated consequences and that just show up all over the place. And this complexity, if you come from a background like mine, which is very broad, with an engineering degree and having been in the military and then lots of different businesses and politics and government and so on. And, I'm just kind of curious. And so I'm interested in a lot of things. So I'm interested in how things are made. If I get a chance to go see something manufactured somewhere, I always go do it so that I can kind of understand how that works. And it's enough, for instance, just in, say, the electronics area, where my degree is in electrical engineering, to just have experienced the explosion of complexity in that space that I am unable to fully make sense out of where it works and how it goes these days. I mean, it's not just me, it's everybody. I mean, if I asked any of you to explain to me how quantum computing works, it's quite likely that almost nobody could really explain how quantum computing works. And I remember having in laboratories in my college being soldering individual transistors together. And now you've got computer chips. They have billions of transistors in them, and they're kind of approaching nanoscale level. So, I mean, there's just amazing. And so if you just even understand that a little bit, you're kind of in awe of the complexity and the breadth of what's going on, and the fact that very, very few people fully understand the whole thing. And if you multiply that times, every other sector that you can think of, which are all in their own way undergoing these kind of exponential kind of increases in complexity, then the thought that going into a period of time where some people like Martin Armstrong say that they're going to have a breakup of the United States, and you get in multiple countries. It's just mind-boggling to try to think about how something as complex and interdependent as the world that we live in kind of breaks down and reconfigures itself in a short period of time. So from that point of view, it's a really, really big deal. And that's enough to, if you're interested in all this stuff, that's enough to keep your nose to the grindstone, as it were. Just sitting there trying all the day long, trying to figure out how does it all work and where is it going and who's on first and all of that kind of stuff, because it's just amazingly complex. And if you kind of color the whole thing with the fact that you can't even tell what's true anymore, and there's all these active efforts to convince you and control you, but with information that is not true, then it just exacerbates and complicates, multiplies the effort, the significance of the complexity of the whole system. So if you're trying to make sense and prepare yourself going forward in the face of all of this, you can easily get target fixation. That's a military term from airplanes and bombers, and they roll in on a target, head down on the thing and get fixated on the thing and get so caught up in trying to just get there, just lined up and get the bomb on that they forget to pull up and they drive into the ground. It was a thing that happened mostly in World War II. So there's a whole lot of effort that's going into trying to make that happen. And so it's very easy to get caught up into that and believe that it is the important and the biggest thing around. Who's going to win in the election in 2020, this November? What's happening to Donald Trump? They got all this stuff going on. But what I've been impressed with in the last few weeks is the kind of magician aspects of how this all is working. The whole basis of a lot of the tricks and the other kinds of illusions that magicians generate are all based upon keeping your attention in one direction while they're doing something somewhere else where you're not looking. And it's not a novel idea to suggest that there might be larger agendas that are bigger than, what's going on in terms of American politics or the war in Ukraine or any number of other things, and that there are larger strategic objectives and forces in play. And it's important to look, to look at that. But I'm impressed of late that it's a whole lot bigger than that, and that a great deal of what is being fed to us through the media is, in fact, an effort to get us all spun up and worried about things that have nothing directly to do with the big objective and what's going on. And it's not just that they're bankers and Rothschilds and those kinds of guys who are orchestrating this at a higher level, although that is certainly the case. And so this whole system is layered. And like I say, you can be kind of think you're really pretty insightful and that you think it's the bankers and the Rothschilds. And so you've got kind of two layers on the thing, those of us down here in the trenches, and then one layer up to but my guess is that it's 5 layers or something like that. It's a whole lot bigger than all of that. And it's been kind of intuitively obvious to me for a long time now that there was something bigger going on that really was driving this whole thing in non-obvious ways. And I've talked about that before, about some big event that's downstream that seems to be known by the powers that be, and it's animating that. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg's building a $250 million underground facility on Maui so that he can live out what? He knows something's going on. You don't do that for no reason. And apparently some of these other rich guys, Bezos and others, are doing similar kind of things. It's almost like they got the word that there's something on the horizon and they better prepare and get ready for that. And I mean, at a lower level, of course, you've got all the preppers and folks that are running around buying ammo and whatever all else they're doing that seem to have some idea that something's coming downstream and that things are not going to work the way they work right now. If you go into Martin Armstrong land and like I said, and you talk about the country disintegrating and then reconfiguring itself in a short period of time, then wow, then you're into a whole new other layer of kind of considerations and thinking about how that could be and what's going to quit and what isn't going to work. But I've been impressed in the last couple of months with the almost certainty that this game is really being driven and played at a much, much higher level than that. I mentioned in the past that Greg Braden, Penny Kelly, and I went out and spent a day in Albuquerque just sitting down and talking to each other and trying to make sense out of in our own way about what was going on. And there's this kind of thread that goes through the middle of all of this that says that there are major efforts and initiatives that are underway, lots of them right now, that are antithetical to the well-being of humanity. There's no way that you can follow the money, if you will, and see where it benefits any humans. That this is kind of the driving us all into the ditch or whatever, in ways that nobody benefits. And that then raises the question, well, who does benefit from it? Because there's essentially nothing that doesn't make sense. It may not make sense to you, but that's just because you haven't figured it out yet. It makes sense to somebody, kind of basic way. Everything is kind of deterministic, and so there's some force that is driving the change, and that force is doing what they're doing for some reason. I mean, it makes sense at some level. And what that does is start to push you outside of the 3 or 4 levels that are commonly understood in terms of the behavior and the operation of this system that we live in. And and if you get to the place where you say that this doesn't benefit humanity in any way, there's no way that it ever makes any sense. I mean, if it kills all of us, it doesn't benefit humanity. If we all become controlled, if we all become subservient to, if they control every aspect of our life, if we lose our human kind of natural human capability for freedom and innovation and creativity and such, and you get driven off into this matrix like track that clearly they're trying to put together. That doesn't, how does that benefit humanity? It doesn't, it doesn't. It benefits somebody else, something else. And so what you find yourself rapidly of working your way into the spaces saying this is bigger than this planet. This is bigger than humanity. This is something else is in play here. And now you're in extraterrestrial land. Because now you're saying, well, wait a second, how can I make sense out of all of this? And the way that you can make sense out of it, particularly if you have knowledgeable people like Greg and Penny to talk to about these kinds of things, is you rapidly come to the conclusion that there's a force outside of this planet or within this planet, perhaps, that is not interested in the well-being of humans in the terms that we understand it, for sure. And that therefore, in kind of magician kind of like terms, that they're trying to keep your attention down here on the ground where you're running around in little circles wondering who's going to get elected or whatever. Well, at the same time, some giant, very extraordinary and powerful process is in place to essentially dominate and take over this planet. That seems to be the underlying kind of scenario, that there is an effort to take over the planet from an outside force, and that they've been working on this for a long time, trying to kind of seed the environment and seed the system and the context such that we as individuals who can make our own decisions within the limits of what we're presented with. They're trying to set this up so that we make the decisions in the terms that are beneficial to them, and that's largely driven by fear. And so they introduce fear into this system, into this process on a regular basis in order for us to decide that we really need the government to help us and get us out of this and whatever, because we see no other way out of it. That's the general kind of notion here, is that if they can set up the narrative such that you see no way out, then you easily ask for help from the forces that are ultimately interested in just controlling. using us for the energy that we generate, or for, maybe to sell humans and make them available somewhere else. Penny will tell you that the predominant interest of these kinds of extraterrestrial groups is in our DNA, and that our DNA is unique within galaxy, that and we can do things, we can be loving, there's a lot of things that we can do that you can't get done anywhere else, and that the scenario is something along the line of that at one level that they need to collect some of this DNA because their species is being ravaged by a disintegrating environment that cannot support themselves anymore, and they need this new kind of these kind of capabilities in order for their species to continue. Well, there's a bunch of those kinds of scenarios that they need. In the past, they've been all about they need gold in order to put it up into the atmosphere to reflect their local sun or star, because they did it for whatever reason. It's been thinning out, and so they're getting harmful rays and so on. And so, but that also turns out apparently that this planet is at a very interesting and unique kind of position, kind of a location. It's on trade routes between other places that are far away, and so it has a strategic kind of value that gives those off of the planet an interest in who we are and why and how they can control us and such. This is we don't have the time here to kind of open this all up, and I'll try to do that somewhat later. But the point I want to make here today is that that the game that's getting played here appears to be much, much, much bigger than what we as humans generally understand. And that it has all the indications of being kind of for the planet itself, that there's this effort. And by the way, it's got a big tail on it. I mean, they polluted the water, they put fluoride in the water, and they put glyphosate in the food in the ground. They're trying to do vaccines in the lettuce and the other plants that we eat, produce. They've certainly polluted all of the air with all chemtrails and things. And I mean, even if you just look at that, things like aluminum and barium and any number of other kind of things that are in the chemtrails, that they are absolutely against the well-being of humans. Why would you do that? And it just goes on. I mean, in the 5G and the electromagnetic field and so on, and this has been lined up one thing right after another that are shaping and influencing and coloring the context in which we live, and by our being an integral part of that context, it's changing who we are. It's changing who we are in terms of not only our biology, but also our psychology and our ability to even make sense and make decisions and think clearly about things and that seems to be the objective, and that seems to be the idea. How do you, if you got people who are independent and unfettered and bright and know how to think, I mean, that's not what you want. You want somebody that's, that'll do whatever you want. That's really kind of subservient in just all kinds of ways. And so if one is going to go into this space, which we're all going to do, but if you're going to go into this space, well, being kind of intelligent about this, having some reasonable idea about where this is going and what the variables and what the objectives and the dynamics and how this all works, such that you can make intelligent decisions about how we go toward a new world, how we build a new world, how we become a new human. Then what you need to understand is that this is not about economics, and it's not about politics, and it's not about, I don't know, it's all the kind of things that we kind of fixate on. I mean, in a kind of a conventional but illustrative way, you've got Elon Musk sitting here going and doing all his Twitter and all of his other kind of things, and at the same time, he's putting thousands and thousands of satellites into the air, communication satellites in the air, and presumably just so that you can have internet from the sky. But you got to start to ask yourself, wait a second, what else is going on here? What, what's up? What's the larger potential, and what's the larger uh, capability that is being put in place here? And certainly we can make that same exact argument around Google and Facebook and Alphabet and Microsoft and all of the rest of them. They've all got big agendas going on with AI and other kinds of stuff that are just starting to kind of become, observed, to become apparent, and they've been spending a whole lot more money on those kinds of things than any of us really are aware of. And so the point, again, is that there are a much larger things in play here than most of us think about on a regular basis, for sure, and that most people understand or think about at all, and that those much larger, much more powerful forces have capabilities that are beyond our ability to understand. I mean, it's self-evident that they've been around, 500,000 years more than we have, or whatever the number is, pick 1,000 years even more than we have. At the rate of change and the way things are going now, you're into space that makes no sense from this kind of vantage. And so, I mean, we literally, for instance, don't know where the thoughts that come into our head, we don't know where they come from. And what we do know, though, is that organizations like the CIA and others have spent a great deal of money trying to figure out how to put thoughts in your head. And so if you just say, if they're getting successful at doing that, well, where would you be if you were 10,000 or 100,000 years longer? You'd have all kinds of sophisticated technology, and you'd be able to engage somebody and put thoughts in their mind, and they wouldn't How would you know the difference? I mean, it's kind of that scale of complexity and strangeness that is an integral part of what we're up against here. And so it requires us all to rise to a whole new level of understanding and being that will allow us to effectively navigate this kind of space. And you can't do that without being somebody different than who we are, because who we are, it doesn't make any sense, and we don't know how to deal with all that kind of stuff. And so this is the kind of the impetus to kind of push us up into this new area. But at the risk of being triply redundant, let me just say again that what's going on here is a whole lot bigger than this focus that we have, driven by the media and all of these sources of information that are all controlled. This is just, we need to back away and get a big picture and say, what is going on here? Because that is going to get us, the larger that we get our picture and the more we understand, the better we'll be able to make the decisions and suss the vibes and whatever to be able to go off into this new direction. And we need to do that sooner rather than later. So thank you.